Welcome to ILTV Insider. I'm Mayan Hoffman, executive editor at ILTV News. The war in Gaza is still raging. On Sunday, IDF officials told reporters inside the Strip that Israeli civilians will not be able to return to their homes in the south unless Hamas is destroyed. But 18 months later, it's unclear how close Israel really is to defeating Hamas. Meanwhile, 59 hostages remain in Gaza, 24 of whom are believed to be alive. A new Khan News poll shows that more than half of Israelis would support a deal to bring all the hostages home, a deal that would include ending the war and releasing Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails. So should Israel's military campaign continue? And will it succeed in reaching its goals? To help us answer these questions, I'm joined by Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, Special Envoy for the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and Mossi Raz, a former Knesset member from the Meretz Party. Let's get started. So, Fleur, I want to start with you. The obvious question, why are we still fighting in Gaza?
That's a great question. It's a question of questions. I don't think anybody thought when this whole horrid thing began that a year and a half later we'd still be in this situation. Unfortunately, we have a very cruel enemy that has perfected the art of embedding itself with the civilian populations, using the civilian populations in order to defend themselves, and understanding that we care about life. We want our hostages back. We care about the life of their civilians more than they do. And so we are fighting honestly, an incomparable war in the terrain that we need to fight in. Why are we still in this situation? Because Hamas is not easily destroyed, because they are completely embedded into the local population. We don't know if it's 50%, 60%, 70% of the population that are Hamas or their supporters. We're beginning to see a little bit of light with people in the Gaza Strip coming out and saying Hamas have brought this tragedy, this catastrophe on us, and we want out. But ultimately, when you have 700 kilometers of tunnels and you have fighting a subterranean war that are very, very dangerous for our soldiers and where our hostages are at, this is a terrible reality. And the irony is that we thought fighting Hezbollah would be hard and that the towers in Tel Aviv would be knocked down. And somehow we managed to defeat Hezbollah, of course not all of it, much, much quicker.
So let me turn to you and ask you, do you agree, is the reason we're still fighting the war in Gaza simply because Hamas is hard to defeat?
Yes, because we fight because the government at the very beginning pointed to targets, releasing hostages and defeating the Hamas. Two targets that for sure there is no military way to do both of them. Probably there is no even military way to do one of them. And since they say they fail, they try again, and they fail, and they try again. They use only for power. They know only the language of violence. So this is the language they use. They refuse to negotiate. They violated the agreements with the Hamas, yes? The Israeli side violated the agreement with a terror organization, and they failed in releasing the hostages. They failed in defeating the Hamas because they don't even know, they don't say at least, what they want. If you go to a war, you have to decide that at the end of the war, I want to see 1, 2, and 3. Not necessarily it's going to happen, but at least you know what you want. What do they want? What is their goal? Who they want to, after the war, who will be the leader in Gaza? Who is going to control Gaza? So the far right in the government say, Israel. There is a price for that, but at least they have an opinion. But it's only the far right. It's not the opinion of the government. So they take over Jabalia, for example, 4 times, and then they go out because they refuse to transfer the land to, say, Palestinian Authority or international power. On the other end, they don't want to stay. And in this way, they go with the policy of before October 7 of strengthening the Hamas.
So if we decided to pick a goal, we meaning the government, I guess, which is not we, but the government, decided to pick a goal and did know the goal, do you believe that at this stage we could actually defeat Hamas?
I don't think that necessarily we have a way to defeat Hamas. I want to, Netanyahu spoke about ניצחון מוחלט. He wants to see victory. We never won in a war. We won their wars in ending the war. This is exactly what we have done with Egypt. We had the 60 days war. I saw that somebody said that this was a winning. No, it was not, because we got the terror attacks, the Yom Kippur War, all the other wars. The real win was when we agreed upon the peace treaty with Egypt. And this is exactly what we have to try to achieve.
Do you agree?
Absolutely not. First of all, we only got the peace treaty with Egypt when they realized that they couldn't destroy us after 3 wars. Huh? And then we got a peace treaty with Egypt. You only get a peace treaty when you know, or the enemy knows, that they can't defeat you and there's no other way. Now, there's a difference to deal with a country like Egypt and to deal with a jihadi fundamentalist terrorist group that in their charter is not just the full destruction of Israel, but the destruction of all the Jews around the world. And this is what the left wing conveniently forget. But, you know, you said we failed in bringing out the hostages. There's 175 hostages that came out. So it's partial failure.
10 million residents that were not in captivity.
It doesn't matter, but there were 250 hostages. 175 were out. How did they come out? They come out because of military pressure put on Hamas until they're on their knees, ready to actually make a deal. And this is the delusion of the left wing. They think somehow you can just sit down and make a deal with people who very clearly want to kill you. And yes, you can blame Netanyahu all you want, but it was national security consensus. And it was a consensus of the government and the opposition for 20 years that appeasing Hamas was the way forward, that appeasing Hamas was going to bring us results. What did it bring us? October the 7th. That's what it brought us.
So tell me something. There are 24 live hostages still in Gaza. So given the situation on the ground and what you just described, do you believe that this pressure is actually going to get them home?
Well, at the moment, we are not allowing in humanitarian aid. And I think that's the right thing to do in order to get Hamas to the point that they want to make a deal. They don't want to make a deal out of good faith. There's zero good faith here. They want to make a deal out of desperation. Now, there's a rumor this morning saying that they will actually give up power. They don't want to be killed, they want to give up power. I don't know what's true, what's not true. There's rumors, there's leaks. We never actually know. All I know is that when you're dealing with an Islamic terrorist group like ISIS, like Hamas, like Hezbollah, unfortunately, they only understand one language, and that is the language that we have to defeat them, and they have to understand that they can't win. That's how we got the peace treaty with Egypt. That's how we got the peace treaty with Jordan, when they realized they couldn't get rid of us.
Respond.
Of course, that's not right. I mean, history, you cannot... I appreciate your opinions, but you change history, which is...
So we didn't have 3 wars that we won?
We had the peace suggestion from Egypt before 1973, and it was us who refused, not them. History, sorry, there are facts.
And we didn't have 2 wars before that?
You can express your opinions. It's very difficult for me to hear them.
They started, right?
But there are facts, and the facts are that what you have said is not true. Sorry.
48, we didn't beat them? 67, we didn't destroy their entire air fleet?
They suggested before 1973, and we opposed. This is period. Now, we see that hostages who were released, most of them, almost all of them, as an outcome of agreements.
After military pressure.
I can shout too. It's easy for me to shout. If you want, we can try who shout louder. Exactly like Israel got security only in 2 borders, with Egypt and with Jordan. Both of them in peace agreements. All the other borders, we never had peace agreements. As a matter of fact, we never agreed to peace agreements. And I'm not saying that this is the only reason, but this is a fact.
Let's get back to the Gaza war, though, for a moment, okay, to the current situation. There are many that have argued that we should have actually maybe not worried so much about the hostages, God forbid the human lives, but of course said, let's fight and let's actually focus on destroying Hamas at the expense. Would the war have been more effective if we weren't so worried about bringing the hostages home?
No, the most important is to bring the hostages home. I'll tell you why. When you go to, when you release people, you know that they survive. When you go to war, you don't know if this war is going to strengthen you or weaken you. You don't know what's going to be in the end. I think that 18 months ago, if one had said that after a year and a half, after 50,000 people were killed, and after that time, Hamas still be in power, still will not releasing prisoners or hostages, I think that we couldn't even believe that it's going to happen. So you cannot know when you start the war, when you go to war. Sometimes you have to do that, but you don't know what is the result. I do know the result of a deal of releasing hostages. And this is the difference between people who believe in human life to people who believe in war.
So, Fleur, respond to this, because first of all, do you agree with what Mossi is saying? And second of all, if the war does end without Hamas being removed from power, what kind of message is that going to send to our enemies?
It's very interesting because he's arguing both about the Hamas war and about the wars that Israel had, that somehow these peace deals were there waiting for us to sit, and that the context of the conflicts that came before have nothing to do with the peace treaties that were signed afterwards. You're using the same argument, which is completely flawed, of course. You're saying that, yes, we have peace with Egypt because of a peace agreement. You are ignoring the fact we had 2 wars with them that brought them to the position of the peace agreement. The same with Jordan. We had 3 wars with them that brought them to the position. You're saying...
We had 5 wars with Egypt and 2 with Jordan.
You're describing a fact.
Amazing.
You're saying we got the hostages from a peace agreement. What you're ignoring is that we got to the agreement with Hamas because of the military pressure. Does it come out of nowhere? I want to ask you, Mossi, would you have gone to war on October 8th? Or would you have sat waiting for Hamas to outstretch their hand in peace to make a deal with us for the hostages? What would you have done?
First, I went to wars more than you, so don't say anything about that.
I'm asking you a question. I'm not making a comparison.
I think it's a fair question.
Just for the history, we had 5 wars with Egypt and 2 with Jordan, at least if you come and speak, know what you talk about. For your question, yes, I supported the war, and yes, it was my mistake. Tamir Pardo was the head of the Mossad, said at the beginning, first we have to do hostages deal. He was right. I was wrong in supporting the war.
And why? Hamas would have done the deal?
I don't know anything about Hamas. You know everything about Hamas. I don't know anything. I do know about history. I do know that we had an agreement with them and we violated the agreement.
When?
Just now, the releasing of the hostages. We violated the agreement. So, if you ask me, what happens if Hamas do that? I don't know. I do know that this government, Netanyahu's government, maybe because of the administration in the US, had an agreement with Hamas and did not implement, violated the agreement. And I think that it's not just violation of the agreement, it's human life. It's the life of the hostages that they play in. And the same thing happened in the first deal. In November 2023, that they stopped, in that case, Hamas violated the agreement, right? But they said we are going to release 7 hostages instead of 10. It's really disgusting. But what was the government answer? No, don't release anybody. And out of those 7 that they wanted to release, they were killed later. So when the government play in the life of Israelis, stop playing in the life of Israeli citizens.
Well, I think that you're completely ignoring the many violations of Hamas. And at the end of the day, it's always a very difficult thing to judge. Where do you draw the line? Where do you let them push? We got into this situation of October 7th because for 20 years, they sent rockets and we kept accepting it. Achala, as they say in Hebrew. We kept kind of, we'll deal with it. We'll accept it. This is the metaphor of the frog in warm water that keeps getting warmer. The reason we got to October 7th is because we did exactly what he's saying we should continue to do, which is accept a little violation, accept an infringement, accept what they did to the Bibas family, where they brought the wrong body. That's not a violation of the ceasefire? You're saying that we violated that ceasefire? When they did what they did to the Bibas family? That complete cruelty, that's not a violation? That they put the wrong body in that casket? How could you say that? I don't understand it.
Now, let me ask you this, though. Everybody has, not everybody, but many analysts have said that this is also tied to Netanyahu's political situation. Netanyahu is the prime minister who, for 20 years, the policy that you just described was carried out by Prime Minister Benjamin. So
I blame him
how much of what he's doing now could be flawed policy? And is his precarious political situation influencing our ability to run this war?
You know, that's a question that I can't answer. I don't know. I don't know what's in his head. And I don't know how much of it is because he thinks that him being in power is better for Israel, therefore he has to remain in power, or how much it is because he actually does believe that the only way forward is destroying Hamas, or somehow he has intelligence and knowledge that we don't have about regional partners, about a potential peace with Saudi, about a potential attack on Iran. We don't know much. We don't know the entire context. I'd like to believe that our leaders are doing the best for our country. Can I put my hand on fire about it? No.
Are our leaders doing the best for our country?
Maybe they think that this is the best, but at the end of the day, we see the results. Netanyahu, it started with that. Netanyahu opposed the two-state solution. He opposed the Arab League Peace Initiative, initiative that was brought to the table 24 times by 22 Arab nations. And they said, it's not me, he said, that everybody who opposes Palestinian state has to support financing the Hamas. And this was exactly his policy. He wanted everybody to say, we have no partner. And for that, he in all his years, I think after October 7 too, even today, he strengthened the Hamas in his policy and weakened the Palestinian Authority because they agreed to peace in two-state solution. And he could say whatever, I don't believe them or whatever, but this is the policy, not was the policy. This is the policy. We want the Palestinian extreme. We don't want them to have an agreement with us.
Now, we're going to run out of time, and I need to ask you that, international pressure, though, is mounting, is getting more and more on the current situation all around the world. It's been, for the last 18 months, growing and growing against Israel. If we continue to sustain the war and continue to fight in Gaza, and I need a one-minute answer, how is that going to impact us politically and militarily?
On Israel? On
Israel. How is it going to impact Israel politically and militarily if we continue in the current status quo?
We become weaker and weaker. We see that. I just came from a family of the soldier who was killed in Gaza 3 days ago, and hostages, not all of them are alive now, and we became fewer and weaker. This is the outcome of war.
Fleur, do you agree? Is that if we continue with the current status quo, continue to fight Hamas, while trying to somehow negotiate for these hostages, can Israel sustain it politically or militarily?
Politically, it can sustain it as long as this government is in power, and we've got another year. We've also got a much more understanding administration in the United States. It's not going to curtail our ability to prosecute the war as we need to prosecute it. I believe that only military pressure brings Hamas to the table, and I think that's been proven. I don't understand what you're saying about the two-state solution when Arafat was the one who clearly rejected and started the second intifada in my city, in Jerusalem.
That's not right.
But again, the left always likes to blame ourselves for everything and not look at the jihadi enemy that is actually creating a civilizational clash in the entire world. It's always our fault, according to them. But what can we do long term? I think the one thing that I do agree with Mossi about is that we don't have a plan. And that's really part of the problem. We need to have a plan. We need to, I think, strengthen the voices that have been coming out against Hamas within the Strip, without the Strip, and we need to bring in regional partners from the Middle East to think about how we deal with Gaza the day after this war, whenever that comes.
So I think after that, a point of agreement. It's time to end the show. So I want to thank both of you for being here, Fleur and Mossi. That is unfortunately, though, all the time. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching Insider. Have a safe and pleasant evening.